Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The federal government announces that it is lifting travel restrictions. We will explain when the new rules will come into effect. Political reporter Brian Lilly explains why he believes the Liberals decided to lift those travel restrictions. And the 120th anniversary is coming up of Canada's deadliest rock slide. BCN's Mike Quinn has the details of Alberta's Frank Slide, which claimed so many lives.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The City of Calgary has declared a state of local emergency. A massive storm has settled into the southern and central part of the province, bringing heavy rain and flooding in many regions, including the Stampede City. Calgary Mayor Jody Gondek explains why Calgary made this important declaration.
It allows Calgary Police Service and Calgary Fire Department, as needed, to go door to door to advise people that they may be under an evacuation order. Now, again, no such order has been called yet, but if we need to evacuate people, this state of local emergency allows police and fire to advise people on properties that may be impacted. The other thing that we have the ability to do is allow our experts in the water services team to access property as needed to protect critical infrastructure. And it also offers purchasing flexibility to members of administration as needed if we get into more severe weather.
Gondek says the declaration will last for 14 days and it can be rescinded or renewed as needed. Alberta's Minister of Environment and Parks, Jason Nixon, says the province is well prepared for high river events in many communities across Alberta.
Since 2020, Alberta has delivered more than 1,500 kilometers of new and updated flood mapping, which is more than the previous 30 years combined. And today I want to thank the hardworking engineers and our municipal partners who have worked tirelessly on that mapping for when these moments happen again in our province, as they are now. These flood maps will be extremely important in the coming days as local emergency managers work to keep Albertans safe and prevent damage to our communities. To all residents in the affected communities, for your safety, please follow the latest details on river conditions and forecasts in your area. Please follow directions. And if there is a need to evacuate some areas, there is not right now, but if there is a need, cooperate with your local officials who are working to ensure everyone is safe.
Nixon says more information about river flooding can be found by downloading the Alberta government's River app and Alberta's Emergency Alert app, which can help you keep informed. Major flooding swept away at least one bridge, washed away roads, and set off mudslides in Yellowstone National Park. This prompted officials to close the entrances to the popular tourist attraction and evacuate visitors. Now, this is the first time in 34 years that Yellowstone has closed. The entire park, spanning parts of Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, will remain closed as officials inspect damage to roads, bridges, and other facilities. The closures come as Yellowstone gears up to celebrate its 150th anniversary year. Well, we've seen our fair share of moisture and up to 20 millimeters of rain so far here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, how long is the moisture expected to last?
Well, Hal, it is going to continue to be a wet, soggy, and chilly one into this evening. We can expect another 10 to 15 millimeters of rain. Also a risk of a thunderstorm this evening as well. Overnight low 8 degrees. And to tomorrow, Wednesday, we're also looking at another 60% chance of showers before it dries up later on in the week. And then we could see more moisture by the weekend. But I'll have all those details coming up for you later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Alberta government announced that as of 11:59 p.m., it will be removing the remaining COVID-19 restrictions, including wearing masks on public transit and ending mandatory isolation. Isolation will just become a recommendation. Officials say masking in Alberta Health Services and contracted health facilities will shift to organizational policy. As for the city of Lethbridge, officials say it will be following the direction of the province.
Well, the city, we rely on the province for anything really related to health, and so with the announcement, we believe in the province's chief medical officer and the decisions they make. So we've been following suit all along with the COVID restrictions and and what's been in place. We won't be requiring proof of vaccination for employees that are being hired. On the transit buses, masks will no longer be required. So pretty much, I believe in stage 3, the province outlines it quite well on their website and the news releases. Pretty much it's back to pre-COVID conditions now.
The Trudeau Liberals are suspending the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for domestic and outbound international travelers and federally regulated workers. Top government sources say the new rules are expected to come into effect on June 20th, though the requirements for foreign nationals coming to Canada will not change.
As for travelers coming to Canada by air, land, and marine, there are no changes. All travelers entering Canada must continue to follow all entry requirements, including vaccination and using ArriveCan. As for cruise ships, vaccination for passengers and crew will remain in place. This decision is based on the unique nature of cruise ship travel, including the fact that passengers are in close contact with each other for an extended periods of time.
We asked our political reporter Brian Lilly why the Trudeau Liberals decided to finally lift the travel restrictions. He says it basically came down to science.
Well, it comes down to the science, but it's political science and not medical science, Hal. That's the big difference between now and when this was recommended. You know, I've spoken to people in the travel industry, airlines specifically, were told back in March, these restrictions that are going to be causing you problems, those will be lifted by May 1st. Of course, that didn't happen. So, you know, basically it came down to bureaucrats being ready to lift these restrictions.
Mr. Lilly will also explain why the CPC leadership race is Pierre Poilievre's to lose. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our newscast. The World Health Organization will convene an emergency committee of experts to determine if the expanding monkeypox outbreak should be declared a global health emergency. Officials with the WHO say the virus has shown unusual recent behavior. Declaring monkeypox to be an international health emergency would give it the same designation as the COVID-19 pandemic. The Director General with the World Health Organization explains the best way of fighting the monkeypox virus.
Today, we have also published interim guidance on the use of smallpox vaccines for monkeypox. WHO does not recommend mass vaccination against monkeypox. While smallpox vaccines are expected to provide some protection against monkeypox, there is limited clinical data and limited supply. Any decision about whether to use vaccines should be made jointly by individuals who may be at risk and their healthcare provider based on an assessment of risks and benefits on a case-by-case basis.
So far in Canada, we only have 112 confirmed cases of the monkeypox virus. Another UCP MLA has thrown her hat in the ring to become the party's new leader. Rebecca Schultz is stepping down from her children's services portfolio to try and become our province's new premier. The MLA for Calgary Shaw officially launched her campaign Tuesday afternoon in Calgary. Schultz says Albertans have had enough of division within the party, and there needs to be more of a focus on remaining in government for the next provincial election in 2023.
My first and foremost goal, if I have the honor of leading this great party, is uniting our party and defeating the NDP in the next election. Yeah. I'm proud and grateful to be part of such an amazing team, a team I know who will want to work together to accomplish this goal. I'm committing to you now that I will knock on thousands of doors in every single riding right across this province. I will make phone calls. I will do everything possible to make sure this province does not go backwards with the NDP.
Schultz is the third sitting cabinet minister to leave her portfolio and campaign for the party's top job. Former Finance Minister Travis Taves and former Transportation Minister Rajan Sani have launched their campaigns. Former Minister Leela Ahir, who was shuffled out of cabinet last year, has also entered the race. Now, with the recent announcements of Alberta ministers giving up their portfolios in order to seek the UCP leadership, Premier Jason Kenney made a minor cabinet shuffle today. Prasad Panda becomes the acting Minister of Transportation, along with serving as Infrastructure Minister. Jason Lewan, meanwhile, will become the new acting Minister of Children's Services. This is on top of his portfolio as the Minister of Community and Social Services. A large drug bust was made in Red Deer, Alberta, to the tune of $375,000. Alert investigators said they confiscated 2 kilograms of suspected fentanyl along with 9 firearms. The seizures were made June 3rd after police searched a North Red Deer apartment along with a Red Deer County hotel room. 38-year-old J.D. Kaufman and 33-year-old Kyle McGray have been charged with 17 criminal offenses relating to drugs and weapons. Both were known to police, and Alert began investigating their suspected drug trafficking activities back in May. Legal Aid Alberta says they're seeing more and more emergency protection orders pop up on their desks each and every day. There's been a 17% increase since 2018, and this puts a real strain on the legal system as they're dealing with about 100 calls each and every day. A lawyer with Legal Aid says they're finding a lot of the orders filed are by women.
Vast majority of the EPOs that we see before our courts are applied for by women. Police may also apply on behalf of a victim. We want it to stop. And how it stops is a fundamental question that I think what we all need as Albertans, we all need to think about and answer that question, to be vigilant, to know that this is sometimes a crime, it's a civil matter before the court, and it's happening behind closed doors.
Ridoc says the increased incidents of violence have been attributed to the financial strain of a job loss and the higher cost of living. The annual Target Hunger Food Drive took place this past weekend in our city, with many donations coming in from across Lethbridge. With a goal of £50,000 worth of food, the Interfaith Food Bank far exceeded the goal, collecting £60,000 of non-perishable items. Daniel McIntyre with the Interfaith Food Bank says they do expect more food to be donated, and it's really needed right now, especially with inflation so high.
We do know that there are some areas of the city where people may have had their bags missed or people have been away. So the donations will continue to trickle in. We have several alternate drop-off locations, as well as both of the food banks and the libraries right now. And of course, it's never too late to bring your Target Hunger bag by or to donate in a different way. We have a lot more families coming to the food bank right now. With high grocery prices and fuel prices right now, we are expecting our numbers to continue to increase. And so a large amount of food at one time like this will be very, very handy.
McIntyre says their final tally of how much food was collected after all donations come in will be calculated by the end of the month. Canada's deadliest rock slide took place close to 120 years ago. Frank's slide showcases the catastrophic damage that was caused when limestone rocks rained down on the community of Frank here in Alberta. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains now, the slide has a very rich history.
The real cause of the Frank slide was the internal structure of Turtle Mountain, which is a mountain that fell down on part of the town back in 1903.
That's according to the facility supervisor for the Frank Slide Interpretive Center, Joey Ambrosi. In the early morning hours of April 29, 1903, the small community of Frank had 110 million tons of limestone rock crash down onto its sleeping residents. The area housed 600 people, and more than 90 were killed during the rock slide.
After the slide came down, the coal mine got blamed for the rock slide coming down. But scientists today, even back then, they said that coal mining was a contributing factor, but not the factor that set it off. It was the internal structure, and then the freezing and thawing on the night the slide came down was the reason it came down on that night.
A total of 17 miners were trapped during the slide, and after 12 to 13 hours of digging their way through coal, they were able to get out.
Meanwhile, the people in town that come over where the mine was, it's just all rocks. And they go, yeah, they're dead. So they kind of made a token effort to try and get in, but they didn't really. But 13 hours later, the men popped out of this little hole above and they looked down and they saw all this destruction, but they were safe. So the people in town were very excited that these people survived.
The slide was so loud, it was said that people from as far away as Cochrane and Calgary could hear it. Scientists say another rock slide from Turtle Mountain is unlikely to happen in our lifetime.
And what they think, after looking at all of this data, is South Peak will come down, but probably in the next few thousand years. And it likely won't come down as one piece. It'll come down as 4 or 5 good-sized pieces that will only come partway down the mountain.
To put the rock slide into perspective, it's said that you can build a wall 1 meter wide and 6 meters high from Victoria, British Columbia to Halifax, Nova Scotia, using the rocks that fell from Turtle Mountain. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Wow, that's incredible. A fundraising event will be taking place this Saturday at Creepy Hollow, located just outside of Warner, Alberta, after one of the buildings on the property burned down last month. Organizers of the event say there will be local bands performing, comedians doing stand-up, and bouncy houses for the kids. Glory Reimer, owner and operator of the Creepy Hollow, says it was the staff who organized the event without her knowledge, and it really touched her heart. But still, it's been very difficult lately.
Absolutely devastating. For even now, I can't think clearly and straight about anything. It's heartbreaking on so many levels, but oh, to watch them come together and do this is truly amazing.
So far, over $3,000 has been raised for rebuilding efforts through the GoFundMe page. More details of Saturday's event can be found on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. A multicultural concert event will be making its way to our city this weekend. Curb Fest will bring together Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists alike to the Yates Theatre. Willie Big Bull is an artist who will be performing at Curb Fest. He says he got his start performing in front of live audiences at funerals, playing some somber and haunting music.
I had a tendency to be singing songs to people when they were kind of in their worst times, really grieving, really feeling it. And I've played in front of a lot of audiences where people were happy. I've played in front of audiences where people were a bit complacent and just, there, and I was more making background noise for them. But there's something about playing for people when they're really feeling it right there in front of you, when they're missing somebody, and when they're going through a hard time. And I got my start being able to be kind of a voice for them to get through that time. They could grieve along with me.
Tickets are only $10, and the event will run from June 17th to the 18th. The man responsible for Toronto's deadly 2018 van attack has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. 8 women and 2 men died when Alec Manassian deliberately drove a van down a busy sidewalk. Omar Najjar, whose father was killed, says justice has been served.
I'm happy that we have him behind bars. I have to say, everybody involved in the process, be it the Crown, the judge, the police, the victim witness services, first responders did an amazing job. It's the one thing that could restore our faith in humanity, I think, after seeing such a monster come out from our midst. It is 4 years on, but it's still very tough to remember the ugly details. You start dealing with your loss, but then there are all these ugly details that you forget. You just, at the end of the day, it's a loss.
Wildfires burning out of control through the American West are forcing evacuations in many regions of northern Arizona. Crews dealt with more hot, dry, and windy conditions earlier today. Around 2,500 homes have been evacuated because of 2 wildfires burning on the outskirts of Flagstaff. The wildfire prompted the county to declare a state of emergency. Crews were planning on using water bombers as an option for firefighting. Emergency response officials say the Flagstaff area fire is one of the country's top priorities right now for firefighting resources. Well, it's been hot and dry in much of the U.S. West, but here in southwestern Alberta, we've had lots of rain and gusty winds, and that wet stuff will be sticking around a little while longer. Full weather details are on deck. The city of Calgary has declared a state of local emergency due to the flooding and massive rainfall amounts. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a look at all of the weather details for our region. Jeanette, the Stampede City was expecting up to 150 millimeters of rain over a 3-day period, but not quite as much here in Lethbridge.
No, certainly not, but we have had our fair share of it. Into this evening, we're looking at another 10 to 15 millimeters of rain, a risk of an overnight thunderstorm as well. Into Wednesday, 60% a chance of showers, high of 18, before it dries up there on Thursday and Friday, looking into the mid-20s there, 23 the high on Thursday. Could see up to 25 on Friday, 20 degrees on Saturday. We're looking at a 60% chance of showers from Saturday all the way through Monday, highs of 19 on both Sunday and Monday. So we're going to get that little tiny period of dry days there, a couple of dry days before heading back into the moisture. Average high for this time of year, 22. Average low, 9 degrees, 34. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1987. And in 1952, we had our chilliest, which was only 3 degrees. Not much cooler than it is these days, it seems. 5:23 was when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening right at 9:40 p.m., giving us 16 hours and 17 minutes of daylight. Okay, so on the west coast tomorrow, we're looking at Victoria, 16 degrees, mix of sun and cloud. 16 also in Vancouver, 30% chance of showers. Edmonton, 16, same thing with Calgary. Both of those cities seeing more rain overnight and into tomorrow, a 60% chance of showers. And winds kicking up to 60 kilometers per hour. It's going to actually be quite windy throughout the prairies. All of these prairie cities looking at winds 40 to 60 K tomorrow. 15 degrees the high in Saskatoon tomorrow with some rain. Showers also expected tomorrow in Regina, high 16 there. 22 the high in Winnipeg with sunshine, but again, the wind could be a little bit of a factor there. Okay, so in Toronto, looking at a risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow, chance of showers, 28 the high, 27 the high in Ottawa, also humid. Humidex looking at sitting at 33 tomorrow, sunshine. Sunny skies in Montreal tomorrow as well, 28 the high, and they're looking at a humidex of 31. Fredericton, also warm and humid, humidex 24, but the temperature 25 degrees. Sunshine in Halifax tomorrow, 23 the high, 20 the high in Charlottetown tomorrow with sunny skies, and a high of 10 degrees in St. John's, Newfoundland with partly cloudy skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Stats Canada says manufacturing sales increased for the 7th straight month in April. It says sales were up 1.7% from the previous month to $72.3 billion. The biggest gains were in the petroleum, coal, motor vehicle, and primary metal sectors. The agency says sales of petroleum and coal products jumped 3.7% to a record high of $10.1 billion in April, helped by higher prices. It says overall sales in constant dollars increased by 0.9%. Root says its first quarter loss widened to $5.3 million. Now that's an increase of 8% from the same quarter last year. The Canadian retailer says sales were up $43.1 million or 15% as all of its stores were open in the quarter. That compared with about 70% open during last year's partial lockdown. Even though the company had to increase pricing due to inflation, it says it did not see a large resistance from customers. Independent telecom provider SkyChoice Communications has filed a federal court challenge of Bell Canada's branding of its fiber optics network known as FIBE. SkyChoice says the branding strategy hinders the ability of independent internet service providers because the term fiber optics has become a key selling point when marketing fast and reliable internet. SkyChoice says it is working with law firms and a grassroots group called Freedom Fighters that is focused on increasing internet affordability. It says it's trying to raise awareness of the high wholesale access costs charged by telecom players to independent internet service providers. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 194 points in the day to finish at 19,548. The Dow was down 151 points to 30,364. The S&P 500 was down 14 points to 3735. And the Nasdaq was up 19 points on the day to 10,828. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $2 to $118.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down $1.35 to $7.26 US. Gold was up 6 cents to $18.0855 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $21.05 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $14.97 per bushel. Barley's at $10.01, canola's at $24.92, and corn is at $12.01 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.20 to $135.20. Feeder cattle were down 3 cents to $171.30, and lean hogs were up 45 cents to $108.45. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.22 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced that it is removing more COVID-19 restrictions, including wearing masks on public transit and ending mandatory isolation. And beginning June 20th, the federal government will be suspending the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for domestic and outbound international travelers, along with federally regulated workers. The requirements for foreign nationals coming into Canada will not change. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain the science behind why the Trudeau Liberals decided to lift the travel mandates once and for all. He'll have the juicy details for us in just a moment.
Here is today's Bridge City News community calendar. Come out and give disc golf a try. On Wednesday, June 15th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Lethbridge College Disc Golf Course, Lethbridge Sport Council is partnering with the Lethbridge Disc Golf Club for an opportunity for the community to learn how to play one of the fastest growing sports in Canada. Learn to throw, putt, and play from experienced players from our local club. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca. On Saturday, June 18th, come and enjoy the Lethbridge Filipino Heritage Festival taking place at Galt Gardens from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This free event is in celebration of Canada's Philippine Heritage Month and the Philippines Independence Day. Enjoy Filipino culture with various performances, live entertainment, and your favorite Filipino food. Everyone is welcome. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, travel restrictions are being lifted, allowing unvaccinated Canadians to board a plane or train once again here in Canada. Now, to discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, you've talked to key people who say this was recommended a while ago, but the government refused to act. Why?
Well, it comes down to the science, but it's political science and not medical science, Hal. That's the big difference between now and when this was recommended. You know, I've spoken to people in the travel industry, airlines specifically, were told back in March, these restrictions that are going to be causing you problems, those will be lifted by May 1st. Of course, that didn't happen. So, you know, basically it came down to bureaucrats being ready to lift these restrictions. Dr. Tam, if you read between the lines in what she has said, you know, she was asked last week several times, you know, what have you recommended to government? Do these things need to still be in place? She wouldn't say yes, she wouldn't say no, but she talked about how, well, when we put them in, it was during the Delta wave. Things were very different. Omicron changed everything. You can't really stop transmission with the vaccines with Omicron the way that, you know, to the degree that we could with Delta. And so things have changed. That was essentially her saying she didn't see the need for these restrictions to be in place anymore. But Prime Minister Trudeau was still defending this on Friday. He was asked about it when he was in Los Angeles at the Summit of the Americas, where he caught COVID, by the way. He did not say, well, you know, you raise a good point. He didn't say to the journalist, you raise a good point, and these are constantly under review. No, he talked about why they were needed, why they needed to be in place. The pandemic's not over, and we believe in science, not like the Conservatives. This was and has been only about owning the Conservatives, showing that he's different, that he cares about these things. That's all it's been about for a long time now.
Brian, it appears as though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau may have used many matters relating to COVID-19 as a political tool. Now, you recently wrote that the Prime Minister makes sure he wears a mask in the House of Commons, but not while meeting with top Democrats in the U.S., as you just mentioned here, the Summit of the Americas. Why the difference?
Again, it comes back to the political science rather than the medical. You know, we haven't had masks. The House of Commons sits in Ontario. We have not had a requirement to wear masks indoors, except in certain settings, for months. By the way, those certain settings we lifted on Saturday, and those were if you were riding public transit, if you were in a long-term care home where people are vulnerable, or in a hospital. And by the way, many hospitals and long-term care centers are still saying, look, we want you to wear a mask. That's fully understandable. Sick people, vulnerable people. But there's no reason to wear one in the House of Commons, and yet he makes a show of doing it when he's in the parliamentary precinct. But if he's out and about, he doesn't. Just last week, he was in Ottawa with the Chilean president, Gabriel Boric. And in official photos and around the parliamentary precinct, he's wearing a mask with the Chilean president. Yet they released photos of him out at a bar, the two of them leaning into each other, having a quiet conversation, Hal. No masks on. He goes down to the United States. He meets with Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker. He meets with California Governor Gavin Newsom. He goes on a podcast sitting in a small room with two former senior Obama advisors, sits with them for half an hour, very close to each other. No masks. What's the difference? Well, it's about showing that the Conservatives don't care about public health measures when he's in Canada, but yucking it up with his friends who are left-wing Democrats when he's in the United States. That's what this is all about.
Now, Brian, one of the big issues the Trudeau Liberals have failed to deal with is passports, long lineups, and delays at the airports. Now they say they were finally taking action. What exactly are the feds doing?
Well, they're going to let you know how long you have to wait to get passports. And they're saying that they're going to, work at reducing the backlog. But to tell you how horrible it is, You used to be able to go and get a passport, and within a week or so, it would show up. You didn't have to pay extra for that. That was just standard service. In my view, Passport Canada was one of the best run departments in the federal government. And I say that as someone who lived in Ottawa a long time. I've spent a lot of time covering the successes and failures of government departments. Passport Canada worked pre-COVID. Now it doesn't work. And the minister's bragging that 72% of people get their passport within 40 days. Well, you used to get it, as I said, within about a week without paying extra. Now, expedited service, you're still going to wait several days to get your passport. This is a system that's broken. You've got people lining up hours at a time, 3 hours in Ottawa. I believe it's 4.5 or more in Vancouver, more than 3 hours in Toronto. I'm not sure how long it is in Calgary, but of course, there's other issues being dealt with in Calgary right now. But it has been a disaster. And the government has tried to say, well, it's because more people want to travel because we're opening up. Well, you should have known that was coming. You were in charge of the travel restrictions. You were in charge of so much of what's going on, and you haven't managed this properly. This is just another example of the Trudeau government putting in ministers who can't handle their files. The department is at fault here, but when the department's not working right, it's up to the minister to fix things. They haven't done it. Trudeau hasn't asked for resignations. He hasn't shuffled his cabinet.
Yeah, the Immigration Department has also been under fire recently, Brian, for delays. Now, you looked at figures and found that it can take almost 4 years to process a skilled tradesperson looking to come to Canada. What's driving that kind of delay, especially when we have such a shortage of workers across the country?
Yeah, you talk to anybody in any industry, and they'll tell you there's a shortage of workers, especially skilled trades, which are in short supply. It's part of why the Ford government here in Ontario has a big emphasis on trying to get young people to take up the skilled trades, because we need people to build things, to make things, to keep the economy going. We can't get enough people coming into the country to do it. We need to train more here. But if you're a skilled tradesperson trying to come to Canada, it's almost 4 full years. It's 43 months. I'll tell you this, my parents came to Canada in 1968. My dad was a tradesman. And I asked my mother the other day when I saw these figures, how long did it take you to be processed? That's just the processing time, by the way. She said it was a couple of months. Between the time when they applied and the time they were told they could come to Canada, it was a few months. Now, they ended up waiting a little while longer, just for personal reasons, but it was less than a year for them to do it. And half of that delay was getting their own house in order, getting their own life together to be able to immigrate to this country. If you're a business person that wants to go in through this program that Quebec has, that is expedited for business class investors, people that will bring money and create jobs, it's 64 months, Hal. For a provincial nominee, so the government of Alberta says, we need people in this industry. The Express program is 21 months. That's almost 2 years. How about
for doctors? What have we heard for doctors? Such a shortage of doctors across the country right now, especially here in Alberta.
Well, they would be either in the provincial nominee program, or there's another program, not for skilled tradespeople, but skilled workers. So they'd be in one of those two streams. So it's between 2 and 3 years for that. And then when they get here, the question is, will the provincial agencies that regulate doctors actually acknowledge their credentials when they get here? And we know that that's often not the case, even when they've been trained in countries with very similar medical procedures and standards and training regimens as we have.
Now, Brian, we are one step closer to the federal government controlling what we read, watch, or listen to online. Bill C-11 is going to give the CRTC that much more power. What are the real implications of this bill?
Yeah, Bill C-11, they invoked closure, so the opposition wanted to continue to debate it. They said, no more debate. We're putting this to a vote. So the government has the votes. It's going to pass. Elizabeth May, the Green Party leader, is she this week? Is she not? I'm not sure. But Elizabeth May's been around Parliament Hill a long time. She said that their decision to shut down debate on this bill was worse than anything she's seen in her time in Parliament. And she was a harsh critic of the Harper government. Now, this is a bill, Hal, that will give the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, the power to regulate what you see, what you read, what you watch, what you listen to online. Now they'll say, oh no, that's not the case. We're not going to regulate in that way. They have a thing called discoverability, where you've got to make sure that Canadian artists are discoverable. Well, let's say that you like listening to audiobooks or you like listening to podcasts. The service that you subscribe to for that will have to be inserting Canadian material. Maybe you want it, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just like true crime. True crime is very popular for both audiobooks and podcasts. So let's pick that genre. Let's say you just want to keep listening to these true crime podcasts. Well, you're going to be forced to listen to or hear about Canadian content on that. They're giving them such broad powers without a lot of guidance that we don't know what the CRTC is going to do with it. But their ability to regulate, their ability to say, you must consume Canadian content, like the 30% on the radio that we have, that could come into play. The CRTC could make that decision on their own, given the way this bill is written, and we would have no recourse to it. Many Canadian artists say this will actually hurt them rather than help them in the online world, which has opened up markets across the globe to anybody sitting with an apparatus like I have right now, my webcam, my computer. It's opened up the entire globe for you to be able to create content, post it, find an audience, and make a living.
Brian, you were among the first to report on the incredible amount of membership sold in the CPC leadership race. You uncovered that in the final days of membership sales, the party actually broke records. What kind of numbers are we talking about? And why do you think the leadership candidates were able to sell so many memberships?
Well, obviously, there's a great deal of interest in the Conservative Party of Canada right now, because it's not just Pierre Poilievre who, his campaign says they sold 311,000. It's not just Patrick Brown, whose campaign says sold 150,000. In total, the party says they've got more than 600,000 members. Back in March, it was around 142,000. So it's a lot of membership sold. And I'm told by senior party officials that in the last 3 days, it was 100,000 memberships.
Wow.
Last 3 days. That is remarkable. Many parties would wish to have that many members, that many people they could call on for a donation or to put a lawn sign up or what have you. So those are staggering figures. And it just goes to show that there is an appetite for looking at alternatives to the current Liberal government. And with all the things we've just talked about, I think we showed a lot of reasons why maybe the government should be reconsidered in terms of who's in charge.
Brian, with the Poilievre camp selling just shy of 312,000 memberships, can anyone other than Pierre Poilievre win this race? And if he does win, can he also defeat the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, I've always said that Pierre Poilievre could defeat Justin Trudeau in a head-on-head election. I'm not saying he will for sure. My caveat is always campaigns matter. And so it would depend on how well Pierre campaigned, how well Justin campaigned, what issues they brought to the table and who had the better run at it. But Pierre Poilievre definitely could. In fact, I also think Jean Charest could beat Pierre Poilievre. I'm not sure about Patrick Brown. I haven't thought of that, but there is obviously an appetite for change. And those are the only three that have a possibility of winning this leadership race at this point. Now, can or will Pierre Poilievre win it? If you take all of their numbers at face value, and we have to because we can't verify it, it's hard to see how he doesn't win. But there's going to be a lot of challenges. We've already seen from Leslyn Lewis and others saying Pierre Poilievre was sending misleading emails in the dying days of the campaign, including telling people that had already registered that their membership wasn't complete and they had to buy a new one. So there's going to be a lot of duplicates. There's going to be challenges on whether someone is actually allowed to be a member. We'll have a better sense. But Pierre Poilievre has to win or come close to winning on the first ballot to take this. If he's below 45% of total points after the first ballot, he's, according to people who understand this system far better than I do, below 45% becomes incredibly hard for him to win. The closer he is to 40, the less chance he has of winning.
Brian, do you think some of the other candidates will start putting their support behind Pierre Poilievre? Maybe somebody like Leslyn Lewis or Roman Baber?
I could see Roman Baber or his supporters going to Pierre Poilievre. With Leslyn Lewis, at the beginning of the race, I would have said, sure, that's the likely second choice. But she's gone hard after Pierre Poilievre. Partly, I think, because she knows that a lot of the people that backed her last time on first ballot are now with the Poilievre camp. So she wants to ensure that the people she still has stay with her. And I think she's trying to say, vote Lewis first and don't rank anybody else. I don't think she wants her support going. She knows that she helped make Erin O'Toole leader the last time, and it didn't work out well for social conservatives. I think she wants to say, show that social conservatives matter, but don't make somebody else the king, because they'll turn around and basically renege on any promises later on.
And the federal Tories choose their new leader in September. Should be interesting to see how this plays out. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, the Christian church has been around a long time, but how church services are held and how the church functions have certainly changed. So what should it look like in modern times? Well, joining me to discuss this is Kelly Stickle, who is the lead pastor at Parallel Church in Lethbridge. Pastor Kelly, so great to have you on again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Janet. It's great to be with you again.
Awesome. Okay, so first of all, many viewers know your church by its former name, right, which was My Victory Church. So why the change, and what's the significance of your new name?
Yeah, well, that's a loaded question, but the big driving force behind that this last 2 years, as you know, and everyone of your viewers is well aware of, was very disruptive in multiple ways, not just with COVID, but with also a lot of the political disruption, a lot of race issues, especially south of the border, and a lot of, I think, a lot more divisiveness in culture as a whole. And I think for us, we wanted to stand out and saying, as a church, Jesus called us to unity. As a church, he called us to separate ourselves from society in many ways. And so we decided, in the midst of all the divisiveness, we wanted to come alongside. And so we chose the name Parallel to say we want to walk with people, we want to come alongside with people and be a voice that is opposite of what is becoming the norm in society today, and divides and divisiveness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there you go. That was a loaded question with a loaded answer. Thank you for that. So, Kelly, your church slogan is for love and impact. So I think for years, many churches were known for what they stood against, right? But it's also important to let people know what the church is for. So it sounds like your church wants to be known for love and for having an impact on the community. So maybe you can unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, it really stood out to me, John 13, Jesus's conversation with his disciples. It carried on into John 15, of course, where multiple times he said, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." And when Jesus gave that command, it wasn't, an additional command to, what we have in the Old Testament. It was, in essence, a replacement command that is the command that we as Christians are supposed to live by. So we're saying, okay, we're going to love, but we're not just going to love. That's a flowery word in society and misunderstood in many ways, but we're going to love like Jesus loved. And Jesus loved unconditionally. Jesus loved the outcast, those that were considered in his time the unlovable. And he extended love to the point of giving himself and his life in love for his friends, like it says. So we want to love like that, and we want to follow Jesus' command, but we don't want to just love like that. We want to have an impact in our community with that kind of love as well. And Paul said in Galatians 5:6 that the faith that really matters, the faith that really counts, is the one that expresses itself through love. And that kind of became our guiding verse, saying we're going to impact our community, but we're going to do it the Jesus way and do it with love. And so that, again, we definitely want to be what we're known for, not what we stand against or who we stand against, but we want to be known as a church that comes alongside and loves and impacts.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people who don't regularly attend church might see things through that lens of, us against them, or the church versus society. So what does the church need to do to communicate to others that they are welcome to come as they are, with all their imperfections, without being judged? I mean, people are attending because they want some kind of direction, right?
Yeah, and I think part of the big shift for me, I've been pastoring for over 25 years now, and part of the big shift for me is that I've always pastored and led churches with it in mind of I want to get people in the community to come in to the church. And where I've shifted in many ways and seeing, what Jesus modeled and how Jesus did his ministry, but then also really studying the early church in the first 3 centuries in particular and how they modeled what Jesus instructed them to do. And I realized that, we can't just wait for the community to come to us when they're ready. We really need to go to them. And I know that sounds, cliche and that sounds easy to do, but going, no, wait a second, we put all of our energies, all of our finances, all of our staffing as a church, all of our monies into weekend services and hoping that people are going to show up to that. And we're like, no, wait a second, let's reposition how we do church, what we think about church, and let's invest more in going to the community throughout the week rather than expecting the community to come to us. So I think the biggest divide has been when we've created the church as a gathering place, a social club that gathers once a week, and saying, no, that's not what we're called to be. We're called to not attend church, we're called to be the church. And so let's go to the community and reach them rather than waiting for them to come to us.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I know on your church website, you actually invite people to these house parties. So what's that all about?
Yeah, well, we looked at everything, all the language we use, and we realized that a lot of the small groups that we have, and small groups is a cliche for a lot of Christians, that people are like, I don't really want to be a small group, and they look at it as a Bible study where one person's going to teach them, and they're not sure if they're going to agree, and they'd have to go with people they don't like. We're like, no, everywhere Jesus went, he threw a party, and it was a lot more about relational connection. Again, studying Jesus's ministry, he was all about, the relational connections. And he would, he wanted to go to Zacchaeus' house and have a party, and he never taught it did anything. Just the relational connection led to Zacchaeus' salvation. So we wanted to really emphasize the gathering, especially throughout COVID and all the rest of it. We wanted to, really emphasize the relational side of things and said, hey, let's just rephrase that to house parties. And in the midst of the relationships, it's amazing. The deeper the relationships, the more spiritual the conversations become, and the deeper we can go into scripture when we have relationship and when we have trust. And so we wanted to start with that on that basis first. And then, instead of saying small group, hey, let's have a house party, let's gather together, hang out, watch a hockey game if we need to, whatever it's going to take, just to gather.
Yeah, and I'm just curious too, with COVID, I would imagine it was very difficult to do those small groups, those house parties. They were non-existent pretty much, and so it's so nice to open up people's homes again and invite others in. But have you found that attendance is a little bit different ever since that whole pandemic took place? It's like people were in a momentum, COVID happened, and it's like the world just stopped, and so many people's interests have changed. And how have you found that, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have discovered that there's a difference in attendance, but again, as a pastor, I wasn't panicking to the degree of saying, well, people aren't coming back to the church. It's like when I hear that from pastors and from leaders, I begin to question going, well, again, that weekly social gathering that at a building, is that the church or is Christians, and how do we reach them? We're reaching them at different levels. So I'm not so worried about, who, is attending or not attending, or how often they're attending, or our numbers back, pre-pandemic. What I really want to focus on is are we equipping the church to reach them and making a difference and an impact in the community? And our attendance did, take big hits like everybody else's and go through that. Happily, we're right back on track and going again and excited. But our focus as pastors and as leaders has really shifted and saying, okay, let's not put all of our energy into just getting bums in the seat on a Sunday and think that that's church. Let's equip the saints to do the work of the ministry throughout the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Kelly, you believe that a church should choose unity over uniformity, right? So, which means like aligning, even if we don't agree on everything. So, that can be a challenge, obviously, when we live in a time like now where there's so much division, as you've been talking about. And of course, we're living in this cancel culture now. So, what does it take to stay in alignment with one another if we see things differently?
Well, I think it's of utmost importance for us as Christ followers to make that a priority because Jesus made it a priority. His final prayer that we have recorded that he prayed over his disciples, he didn't pray, keep them protected. He didn't pray, keep them theologically correct, keep them baptizing the right way, taking communion the right way. He said, make them one. And his main prayer was for unity. So I think as the church, we need to make that as a priority and model that for the rest of the world. Where it comes to unity, not uniformity, is we can value, if we value unity over uniformity, meaning that we don't have to all agree to be in unity. We can be in unity even if we disagree, especially if we disagree. And I think our society as a whole has lost the challenge culture, the willingness to question, the willingness to debate. We've lost that art in some way, and I think that's very dangerous because we have polarizing sides. Everybody's splitting up and going into their own little camps, and I think it's very easy on both sides of the camps to get deceived and to go off the rails too far when we stop challenging and debating and questioning and learning how to do that. I think we need to get back to some of that and saying it's okay to question, it's okay to challenge, it's okay to argue, as long as we value the relationship and the unity over whether or not we agree.
Now, how do you go about handling things when you may have someone who visits your church, but they're opposed to some of the things that you teach and believe in? Do you still welcome them, and do you still offer to help them if they need assistance in some area?
Yeah, absolutely. Without question, we make as much as we possibly can. We work with those who are willing to work with us, regardless of their backgrounds, their beliefs. We have a lot of different backgrounds and different belief systems and a lot of people that have been raised in church, lots that haven't, lots that have been raised in way different denominations or belief systems than what we preach. And so we have a whole bunch of those that come in there, lots from polar opposite sides, politically, polar opposite sides, religion, when it comes to religion and belief systems, all of that. And yet we are able to work and do that. And part of that is just setting a culture to say, hey, we're going to value unity over agreeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we tend to meet as we normally do in church buildings, and you were kind of alluding to this earlier, and we're encouraged to invite people to join us. However, the early church also did a lot of taking the church to where people are instead of having them come to a church building, like what you were saying earlier. So what does that look like in today's culture?
Well, I think the church needs to take its job back in many ways. Where what I mean by that is the way that the early church got into the community is that, and you see it right in the book of Acts right away, and then doing historical studies of some of the practices of the early church, especially in the first 3 centuries. The early church was known for Romans would write about the church, and what they were known for is their care of the least of these. It was their care for the needy. And they would, in Acts chapter 2, there was no need among them. It's repeated in Acts chapter 4, right? They shared with everything. Everyone had everything in common. There's no need among them. They made sure that there was no need in their vicinity, and the church would reach out into the community and help the widows and the orphans and the poor and feed the hungry. And the church actually grew, historically grew the greatest in the 3rd century. So it entered the year 200 with 200,000 Christians estimated on the planet. And by the year 300 AD, there was 6 million Christians on the planet. And in the midst of all that, what happened? Well, in 249, there was what's called the Cyprian plague that lasted 20 years and wiped out a fifth of the Roman Empire. What's fascinating is in the midst of that plague, it was Christians that went in. The church went in, ministered to the sick and to the dying. Many of them died themselves, but in that, they offered hope when the rest of society was hopeless. And because of that, the church grew. And I think that's where we got to take our job back and get into the community and find needs in our community. And it should be the church that steps up and feeds the hungry, gives water to the thirsty. All the things that Jesus said in Matthew 25 are still great needs today. And I think we need to step up and take that job back.
Well said. It looks like we're almost out of time, but Kelly, any final thoughts on where today's church should be heading and what we need to do to be more effective in touching people's lives?
I'm more excited than ever with the church, the conversations that I'm having with pastors, with leaders, with where the church is at. I think, we can look at, COVID as the great disruptor, but I really think we're going to look back in history and saying it was the great revealer, where I think a lot of us as pastors or leaders are asking the right questions, having the right conversations. And I think the church of the future, I'm more excited about the church of the future than I've ever been. And excited that it's stepping up and taking its job back and being more than just a weekly gathering.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Pastor Kelly. Really appreciate having you on once again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeanette. It's great.
Absolutely. Kelly Stickle is the pastor at Parallel Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.